Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Politically Social podcast brought to you by the Current Affairs Times. I'm your host, Afia Singh Gupta, and today we have with us Professor Joseph L Giacalone, who's a retired NYPD Detective Sergeant and has held many positions during his more than 20-year career. Most of his career was dedicated to conducting and supervising major criminal investigations. Currently, Professor Giacalone is an adjunct professor in the law, Police Science and Criminal Justice Administration Department at the John Jay College. He's also the author of the Criminal Investigative Function, a guide for new investigators. Welcome, Professor.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So Joseph, my very first question is this. Frank James, he walked right through the emergency exit, and almost multiple times in a day do people do that at subway stations. How can the government ensure that there's no security violation here? And what steps can officials take to really identify the people that walk in?
Well, anybody who uses a turnstile that doesn't pay for it, so they go through a gate or they hop it or they climb underneath it, it's a misdemeanor in New York State. It's called theft of service. We just refer to it as turnstile jumping, but it's called theft of service. And you can either get a DAT, which is a desk appearance ticket, or a summons. It's up to the police officer who writes it. However, the New York City Council didn't want the police department enforcing this rule, saying it was a crime of poverty, and the people that didn't have money were jumping the turnstiles, and then they were being prosecuted because of that. So there's a fine line between, bad public policy and what policing needs to be done. And this is what currently New York City is facing right now.
Right. And what's your take on the faulty cameras? Like, local officials have been warning for years that the subway cameras have faced maintenance issues and chronic problems. And there's been data that says that 31% of the planned maintenance checks never take place. How difficult does the job become for NYPD officers in that situation?
Well, it's unfortunate that this incident highlighted that. So we saw a problem with security cameras, and they should have been fixed yesterday, right? As far as I'm concerned, the security cameras provide that safe feeling, quote unquote, for riders of the subway, so that people feel that since the cameras are there, that they're less likely to be attacked or less likely to be harmed in any way. So it's this false sense of security now, the fact that many of these security cameras aren't working. So they need to get on top of that, because people are already hesitant about taking the subway and the rise of crime in the subway. Then you had this incident where the guy shot everybody. So people are a little hesitant. We have to make it easy for people to take the train. We have to make sure that they do so, because the subway is the lifeblood of the city. If people refuse to take it, we have a huge problem. And now we're trying to get back after COVID and everything. Now we're dealing with crime. We need to make sure that people feel safe.
Right. And the MTA board apparently has approved a $50 million contract in 2022 to install closed circuit cameras near the gates in about 88 subway stations. But where do you think all that money is gone? Like, do the NYPD officers get to know on when these closed circuit cameras would actually be installed?
Well, I don't know where the MTA is, what they're doing with the money, but, this is part of an issue between, you have two giant agencies like MTA and the New York City Police Department. You would hope at one point that they do confer about some of these things, because New York City has what's called a real-time crime center, where they can plug into security cameras that the NYPD puts out, but also probably what the MTA puts out, right? Because it's all in the city agencies kind of thing. So it's important, because they can then access these videos in an incident that we had in Brooklyn, so that they could get a photo of the suspect and get it out to the public immediately. And you see how fast that works when everybody is looking for somebody specifically.
So while New York City's subway system is statistically safer than it has been in the past, data shows that the rate of violent crimes have spiked since 2019, and this is during COVID. And NY Times reported that the felony assaults have increased by 25% over the same period. What's your take on this?
Well, we've seen violence in the New York City subway unlike we've seen probably in the last decade. So it's we have to be careful sugarcoating these things and saying what, crime is not as bad as it used to be, because that's what people always, throwing us back 30 years and say, oh, well, it's not as bad as it was in 1990s. It shouldn't have to get that bad before we expect our officials to actually do something. So when I hear that argument, I kind of like lose my mind about it, because we shouldn't allow people to take advantage of the system, and we shouldn't allow people to violate other people's rights. And this is where I have to draw the line in that. So we've seen, unfortunately, a number of homicides in the subway that we haven't seen this many in the last 5 or 6 years combined. So it is disturbing, people being thrown in front of trains. We've had sexual assaults that have happened on the platforms. The list goes on and on. The quality of the subway has really deteriorated. I take the subway every week when I go to school, and I can tell you something through even my own experience, where I saw what New York City looked like in 1992 when I got on the police department, and I saw how good it could be. And we have probably lost 20 years of gains in crime fighting right now.
So that day when Frank James, when the attack in the subway happened, the public panicked after the incident, which is obviously natural. And that's really why James managed to run. But the point is that there was not enough MTA staff over there, nor were there police officers over there. Often, and I've seen this myself, that we don't really see MTA staff at all subway stations. Sometimes it's just one person by the ticket counter. Now, obviously, concerns over the subway safety has prompted our mayor, Eric Adams, to announce an omnipresence strategy on the subway. Will that really work?
Well, let's just address the first part first. So MTA started years ago getting rid of the token booth clerks, right? So we rarely see somebody now. We replaced them all with machines. So, this is where we always, fight for, hey, we need $15 an hour, we need $20 an hour, and this, and then they say, okay, here's your replacement. So when we have technology that can replace people, this makes us feel less safe, because when you had the token booth clerk there, at least you knew that somebody you could run to and they can actually call and make a call to 911, or you would feel a little safer. So we've lost that. I don't think we're ever going to go back to the days where we're going to see token booth clerks everywhere again. So this is just part of the course that we're dealing with in the subway system. I can tell you something right now. I've seen less cleaners, that's for sure, because the subway has looked this dirty, hasn't looked this dirty in a long time. And I've been pushing for this. I've done interviews on this before. They need to improve the lighting. They need to clean the place up, because I know people don't want to hear broken windows, but when you see garbage on the floor, people tend to just throw their garbage down there because nobody else seems to care, kind of thing. So that's why the receptacles need to be emptied. That's why we need to have them cleaned and swept, because when it looks cleaner and it's brighter, people will feel safer. And we can't put a cop on every platform. We can't put a person on every booth. It's just impossible. We'd have to hire thousands of more cops, and they're never going to do that. So this is the system that that they've built, and unfortunately, technology has changed a lot of the ways that we do security.
Right. How does law enforcement react or deal with threats in general, in your experience? Like, how can we distinguish between what to take seriously and what not?
Well, it's very difficult to be able to, when somebody posts something online, to be able to say this person is a real threat or not, right? So we have freedom of speech. You can basically say just about anything you want. And if you're on social media like I am, the issue that comes down to, there are people that say so many things that you just kind of shake your head. They can't be all investigated. They can't all be, looked upon as this person is a real threat or not, because generally most of them aren't. And then when you have an incident where you have this guy who ranted online about homelessness and everything else, and then he actually goes out and does something, unfortunately, there was no way to prevent that from happening. So you have to take certain threats seriously in certain things, but if most of the things you'll see are just from anonymous trolls, people will just say stuff, they have no screen names, they have no pictures, they have no things. For those individuals that, who are using their real ID and saying stuff, generally they don't be viewed as a threat, right? Because if you're already outed yourself, this is who I am. I'm Joe Giacalone, and this is what I think. People tend to ignore them, because they say, well, why would this person who is, obviously identified himself, really be a threat? He's just ranting, or he's just, just going off the rails, so to speak. So it's a very difficult job to be able to determine who is going to do what. And unfortunately, the police don't have a crystal ball to be able to say that this person is definitely going to do this.
Right, but how does law enforcement generally deal with threats on social media? Like, I mean, it's one thing to say that, it's hard to distinguish what to take seriously and what not to, but what are the steps generally that a police officer would take?
Well, I know that the NYPD has what's referred to. I like to call them social media teams, right? So that they can look at certain things for threats. So, for instance, they're looking for gang language or anything like that. Every police department, I don't care how big or how small, should have a team that is dedicated to social media, even if they have to hire a civilian. So, if you have a small department, to be able to cull this information off the internet to see if there are any real threats out there, let alone for just general crime incidents like gangs and shootings and retaliation, but also for bigger things like we saw with Frank James about somebody plotting to do something, and that basically saying that you can't prevent me from doing it and everything else that goes along with it. You have to first identify that, and that's where the public's help comes in too. That's why that whole motto from 9/11, if you see something, say something, that still carries over to today. I think sometimes we've gotten away from that message, but it's still out there that if people see somebody or something that they're saying online, they need to at least report it to the social media people and saying that this information is inappropriate and should be taken down.
Right, right. I'll move to a little different topic. What's your take on ghost guns, which are built from kits and are really untraceable?
Right, ghost guns, present a whole other issue for policing. The respect that people are just building their own guns and then using them. It's still the fact that guns are a problem that remain a problem. Uh, it's bad enough when guns get stolen. Now we have people making them in their basement. So they need to, like, for instance, the federal agencies, the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, the agencies that deal with a lot of guns and drugs. Uh, I am sure that they are looking through internet sales and all those other things about people selling these things. That's the only really way to combat that, right? To deny them the parts to be able to put these things together. And then what happens is that you get what we refer to as community guns, where they have a gun, they shoot somebody with it, and then they hand it off to somebody else. Uh, and then it's going to be more difficult to track these, guns per se throughout the communities. But ballistics will still show you certain things that these bullets belong to a certain gun. It's just that they won't know where the gun came from. So, listen, we have issues with stabbings. We've had issues with people getting thrown in front of trains. Uh, yes, guns are an important focus, but we also need to be able to look at all the other threats that are out there too. And unfortunately, right now, there are many.
Right. And right now the MTA continues to be governed by the state government and not the city. Do you think that needs to change?
No, I mean, listen, centralized to the state or whatever it is, the state gets the most funding, so to speak. Things trickle down, from Albany. So I listen, I think that keeping all the mass transit still under the state is probably a good idea. The issue that comes down to is policing that subway like we used to is what seems to be an affront to certain individuals, not only on the city council, but also in the general population, which is kind of a head scratcher. People, listen, there's plenty of people that don't like the police, want to defund the police, want to abolish the police, but they have to be forced to take the same subway if they're actually doing it. So this is something that I think we are going to see some major changes coming up in the near future.
And what do you think are some of the major challenges that NYPD faces just as an organization?
I think the biggest threat well, I don't know so much threat, that's probably a bad word, but I think the biggest issue that the NYPD has to deal with is the political nature of dealing with it. Policing has always been political, right? So whether you're on the left or the right, I always say, how come we can never have a happy medium? And unfortunately, the political climate against the police has gone so far left that it's going to actually come full circle, I think, come this November. And I've been saying this a number of times. For those of you that don't like the police, whatever, that's fine. You're entitled to do that. But if you've pushed that pendulum so far to the left, you are going to get a reaction that is something that you're really not going to like later on. Small steps, small increments, you could get things done. Too far left, too far right, nothing gets done. Nobody's happy. We need to have politicians and we need to have people come towards the center on these issues, because not everything is a left and right issue. It's right down the middle. And unfortunately, what I've seen is people who have made a lot of these decisions don't live in the neighborhoods that will be affected most by violence and crime. And that's what gets me angry.
Right. And I'll move to one question that I wanted to ask later, but I'll ask that now. We interviewed Francisca Puebla, and he told us that what he's annoyed or pissed off, he's pissed off because he doesn't have any security. Like he took a chance. No one at McDonald's informed the cops of anything. He literally went ahead and told the cops that this guy is right there. And I think it's Frank James. And as of today, there are no patrolling cars in the area. He does not have any security. What is your take on this? Because obviously, if we want people to be more responsible, then they also expect backup and security, which sometimes they don't get.
Well, just like I had said before, the police can't be everywhere, but this is the argument that we have from the far left, right? That the police don't deter crime. So then when something happens, they say, well, where were the cops, right? So the police can't win in this argument, right? So if they're there, they're too much. So, they're an occupying force. If they're not there, you're saying, well, they're racist again because they're not here. So this is, something that the police deal with on a daily basis. This went exactly as it should have gone. The police identified a suspect. They got his photo out there. They put the phone number out. They put a reward out too, and they get phone calls for it. Possibly we still don't have a yes or no answer that this guy even called on himself,
Right.
with the reward money. So it's exactly what the police are supposed to do. The police and the community have this strong relationship. The people who keep on saying that it's a bad relationship are the ones who want to get rid of the police totally. That's basically their, ace in the hole, so to speak. Let's create the divide between the cops and the community so that we can get rid of them. It's never going to happen because if you see poll after poll, people who live in the communities most affected by crime want more police, not less. So there are many politicians who have followed the activists down this rabbit hole. And unfortunately, many of them are going to be found out of work come November because they're not doing what the majority of the people want them to do. And this is an example of what we're dealing with. So listen, I do a lot of interviews. When the police do good, I say the police do good. When the police do bad, I also say the police did bad. But I never hear from the activists and reformists when things happen, they never say, well, you know what? This idea really wasn't good and we need to fix it. They never say that. So, if we want to come towards the middle, then we need to come towards the middle. But the police can't always be wrong. It's as simple as that. It's impossible that they can always be wrong.
Right. There has to be a balance. I mean, they're working hard too. But what's your take on the fact that it almost took 24 hours to find this man? And really it was he himself that he called on himself. What's your take on the time frame?
Well, listen, we have 9 million people in this city. It is huge. I mean, most people who've never been to New York City don't understand how big this city really is. We have more population than some states do, I think. So you can hide in plain sight, and New Yorkers have been trained. Most of us have been trained, especially old ones like me, to mind your own business. You keep your eyes ahead of you. You don't look at anybody. You don't make eye contact. You don't do any of those things. You keep on going. So it's not difficult to say that somebody could disappear within New York City. I mean, if I wanted to, I would say I would challenge anybody. If I wanted to go to New York City, you couldn't find me. Probably take you a lot longer than 24 hours.
Right, right. Let me ask you one question. In your experience as an investigator, what do you think was the motive behind this attack? I mean, if we take a look at his past videos that he uploaded, what do you think? Why do you think he did this?
Well, one thing that they haven't come out with is what his motive actually was, right? I mean, we can all speculate what his motive is if you just watch his videos. So I don't want to discuss that per se, like what I think was going on in Frank James' mind. But what I do want to say is that not every time that we see something terrible happen that is involving mental health crisis. So, and what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at Frank James, we could say, listen, anybody who did what Frank did, you would say that this person is definitely not of their right mind. And I would agree with that. But if you look at the planning that was involved, the fact that he brought a gas mask, he brought explosives, he had a way to escape, he had a way to get there. This was all well planned out. So the fact that he panics when it actually happens is a whole other story, right? So the police get lucky in that respect, right? He leaves his wallet or his ID card, his driver's license, and they find the truck right away. So these are all the things that, could go wrong when you are planning if you're not a master criminal, right? I kind of jokingly say that he looked like a master criminal when he started, and he ended up to be like Wile E. Coyote, right? I mean, thankfully that nobody died during all this, and that it didn't go any further. It's just the fact that he panicked in that. So we tend to, like, with a broad brush, say everything has to do with mental health, and I would say many of them do, but certain things just don't when you look at exactly what transpired during this event.
Right. But I see how can law enforcement really deal with issues of mental health patients? I mean, I know that I attended one event where Mayor Adams said that, his administration is going to start having mental health professionals who can be called on a 911 call. But until that happens, how does a police officer deal with someone that has mental health issues?
Okay, so we have basically two questions there. Let me handle the second one first. The mayor coming out with these mental health things. Listen, the former mayor, de Blasio, said the same thing a year or two ago, that we were going to have all of these social workers and all these things to go out there. It didn't come to fruition then, and I doubt it's going to come to fruition now. All right. I mean, they just can't seem to get out of their own way with this. But here's the other issue: mental health shouldn't be a police problem. Mental health should be dealt with mental health professionals. The problem that we have is we do not have the facilities anymore to deal with the number of people that really need to be held up for mental health evaluation. And this is the dirty little secret that politicians have been closing mental health facilities in New York down for decades. So we've lost most of Creedmoor, we lost Meadowbrook, all of these places are gone. Bellevue used to be a big facility. The Kings County Psychiatric Center is a lot smaller now. We do not have the capacity to deal with this. So what happens? You get them evaluated, and within a few hours, they're back on the street, and the police then have to deal with them. So the police deal with this on a daily basis, and 9 times out of 10, these go flawlessly. I mean, if you think about how many people in New York City need mental health that the police deal with on a daily basis, that they do so flawlessly without any issues. It's the only ones where they go, what we used to refer to as go sideways, are the ones we hear about. But this happens hundreds of times a day across the city without any issues. So the deal is that the police unfortunately have to deal with the failings of our politicians and all of the other agencies that are supposed to deal with it. So, like, for instance, why is the Department of Homeless Services never called upon to do a press conference when something goes bad with the homeless community? We saw 4 people killed in one incident. We saw the serial killer from Washington, D.C. come kill homeless people on the streets of New York City. And not once did anybody ask the Department of Homeless Services about, were these people in contact at all? What services were offered to them, right? And I know I'm going to sound biased a little bit on this, but the NYPD seems to be the only city agency that its feet is held to the fire when something goes wrong. We need to hold these other agencies accountable. And I mean accountable, meaning publicly, where they are forced to answer questions by the press, like the police do almost on a daily basis. And until that happens, we are going to see these same problems over and over and over again.
Right. Well, that's a very important point. Now, James commented saying that Mayor Adams can't stop crimes in any subways. He can slow it down, but not stop it. What do you think prompts criminals to believe that the government is really bound to fail?
Well, if you look at all of the reforms that we've seen bail reform, we've seen parole reform, we've seen raise the age where now you have to be 18 years of age in order to be charged as an adult. We have now elder parole is on the table. We have released a massive amount of prisoners that have happened during COVID when there was no chance of them getting a job or going to work. I mean, to me, that was the dumbest idea on top of dumb ideas, right? Letting people out of prison without any chance of keeping themselves busy, like finding a job or going to work, right? Because everybody was home. Nobody wants to talk about these things. Mm-hmm. But these are the problems that they face. The police have to deal with these issues every day. So can we speculate that criminals feel emboldened? Absolutely. You can get caught with an illegal handgun and be released almost within a few hours now. So there is something, and I'm sure you've heard of it, it's called deterrence. And when there's no more deterrence, people will then take advantage of it. Listen, criminals are opportunists. They will take advantage of every opportunity that is afforded to them. That's why they're criminals. And that's what makes them different than the ordinary citizen. The ordinary citizen, if you left $5 on the table, they walk away from it. They wouldn't even take it, right? Because the integrity that people have. There are other people that cannot pass anything up. And if you think that they're not going to take advantage of the lax rules, I mean, we have a problem with violence. We have a problem with guns. And meanwhile, you get locked up with an illegal firearm, you're not going to jail. So to me, that's just absolutely ludicrous in so many aspects that we even have to keep on pressing Albany to change that. Unfortunately, the politicians up in Albany refuse to admit that some of these reforms went too far and that they need to be fixed. And that's why many of them are going to be on the unemployment line in November. It's as simple as that.
Right. And what do you think Mayor Adams means when he says if people would be ready by blueprint to end gun violence, you'll see that it's not just a police approach.
Stop running the police department. That's the first thing. He has a police commissioner that we don't see much of. She seems to be competent enough to run the job. But unfortunately, the mayor, when he has injected himself into just about every aspect of policing, in my opinion, has created an apathetic executive department, executive levels in the department, meaning they just throw their hands up and say, well, let's wait till the mayor decides to do something. So we've gotten away from proactive policing for that reason. We've taken it out of the hands of the commanders to make decisions, and we've given it all to the mayor. And now they're just being reactive, right? Waiting for somebody to say something, somebody to do something. And this is the problem. So you have apathy, and sometimes you have ignorance, where it's like, who knows, who cares kind of thing. And this is what the environment I believe he's created. And I can tell you, I've talked to some of the men and women in the police department, and that's exactly how they feel. They say, we'll just wait for Adams to tell us what to do next. Because you're kind of caught in this catch-22, right? You have the reformists and the activists go after you every time something happens. And then you have the mayor looking to, do whatever he's doing. So it's kind of like you're kind of caught in the middle. So you get the theory behind this is which will get me into less trouble if I do what the mayor wants me to do, or I don't do what the activists want me to do. And that's what we're dealing with.
Right.
Man,
Well,
these are real people.
Right.
People, a lot of times, these are real people behind those badges and the hats and the thing. They think just like everybody else. I always tell people, where do you think we hire cops from? We hire them from the community. There's no special place that we get them from. So they think the same way that everybody else thinks, generally in regards to some of these things. And listen, we've all been in the workplace where we've had a boss that has micromanaged everything, and it just gums up the whole system. If you're looking at a micromanaging standpoint right now, we're seeing it live right from the mayor.
Right. Do you think there's enough being done to support cops in general? Meaning, even cops can get stressed, even they can have issues. Do you think they're trained, well, not just to catch a criminal, but also trained enough to deal with their own issues? And do you think the administration really does take care of them?
Well, this has been a problem for policing since it started, right? The mental health issues that you have with cops. I mean, the things that you do all day, the things you see to see what people do to other people. It takes a toll on many people. I don't say all, because there are some people that be able to shrug this stuff off every day and be able to go on with their lives like nothing ever happened. But for other people that they really internalize a lot of these things, end up with some, severe problems, whether it's, vices like smoking or drinking or, all those other things that could go along with it, including illegal drug use, right? So we're seeing about legalizing marijuana and how that might affect policing and stuff like that. This is a major issue, mental health in the police department, because if you're a police officer and you ask for help, they'll take away your guns from you. They'll take away your livelihood, basically. So then you get labeled as rubber gun squad and all the other things that go with it. So asking for help in the police department is detrimental to your career. And that's why, unfortunately, we see spikes in suicides, in certain years and things that happen, because there is really no way to get the help that you really require from it. And if the city can't push it, because if they push it, too many cops will end up not being able to work, and that is counterproductive for them. So it's a real problem, but it's just not New York City. It's every police department out there. And, we have programs that you could do things anonymously, this and that, but still cops are worried that something might leak out. And then if something leaks out, then they're in, then of course their careers at stake. And then the way to make money and provide a family and provide food and shelter for your family become a problem. So most people just unfortunately keep it to themselves and just keep on moving ahead and basically hope that things go well, right? But hope is not a plan.